Hello and welcome to the Orchard live stream on Pi Day. For our Pi Day event, we're going to be making a double pendulum. This will exhibit some of the features of pi. Hope you're having some pie today. The whole Orchard team's here. We got Dan and Eric. They're sitting by waiting to answer any of your questions. If you have any questions in the live questions, they can answer them. As always, as you can see on the screen in the bottom right hand corner on Orchard, there is the intercom chat service. So all you have to do is open that up and you can start a new conversation with us, and they'll be standing by on that too if you'd like to private message us if you have any questions. As you can see from my page, what you're looking at is the browse page. This is the main landing site for Orchard. Once you get to the site, you can browse through these designs and see if you find anything you like. You can also see what other people have made here. And recently we made the search bar open by default. You can close that if you want to get a little more room while you're browsing. You can just search for designs here. We've also added categories to try and organize these designs a little bit more. These are just some initial categories, so you can, if you have any category suggestions, let us know. We could add them to it and modify them. Also, you can sort designs based on approvals, creation time, update time, etc. I'm just going to do a quick overview of the site since we have addressed all of that in the previous live streams, but just for the newcomers. The other pages are the profile page. If you click in the top left hand corner, that takes you to the profile page. As you can see, here are some designs that I made on Orchard. Some information about myself. We also have the private design tab. I haven't made any yet on the line, but this is where your private designs would go. If you would like to model in private without sharing your designs, all you have to do is click on the private, get a personal subscription account. And you can do that from the account page right here. Right now we're starting at $7 a month for a personal monthly subscription. And that gives you access to make as many private designs as you'd like. If we go back, as you can see, we also have help in the top right corner of every page. This will give you some info on browsing the site and how to use the site. This is also present on the CAD page, and I'll be highlighting it and showing it later. And some of our top level menu settings, log out, log in, etc. Link to the forum and our new our new education portal for learning how to use the site. It's going to have tutorials for making designs and information about documentation about each of the tools and how they're used and how to get the available actions for them. We've also got some light dark theming for modeling at night if you'd like. It kind of helps. Also links to our blog and contacting us. So today we're going to be making the double pendulum. I've already made it for anyone that wanted to print it ahead of time. So we're just going to type double in the search bar. There's double pendulum. As you can see from the design tree on the page right here over here on the right hand side, these are all nodes. These are different saves on the design where different people have modified and edited the designs. This is a little bit more complicated double pendulum. It's got a base feature. This was designed to have a spring in between to give it a little play as it was rotating around. We're just going to do a basic double pendulum. I think it's this node right here. So this is what we're going to be designing today. Each of these nodes can have comments, approvals, tags to describe these features and to let people know how they printed. You know, you could leave a comment that it printed well. And also each of these nodes has a parts list. So as you can see right here, for this node, there are 4 parts in the scene, an 8 centimeter pendulum arm, a 12 centimeter pendulum arm, this connector right here, and the pendulum base. And these are the parts that we're going to be making today. Although I think I'm going to make the arms a little longer because the period of motion is a little short. So also you can also just zoom in to your screen using control just like any other browser page. And since I have really high resolution on my screen, I'm going to go ahead and zoom that in for you so you can see it a little better. Okay, this is also where we have the buy and download buttons, and this will allow you to buy these parts printed through a local hub on 3D hubs, or you can download them and print them yourself. So as always, we have the intercom in the bottom right hand corner. Hit us up when you have any questions anywhere on the site or any suggestions for anything. We prioritize development based on user feedback, so just let us know how we can make the site better for you. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. In the bottom left hand corner was the edit scene button. I clicked that. That dropped us right into the modeling interface. Before I delete these parts, I'm just going to make a few notes, or note a few things for you. When you see a part, there's a little bit to this interface too I can describe. We have in the top right the main menu. We're going to go ahead and set our units to millimeters for this modeling today. And we're going to, in the top right corner, we also have help. Let's see if that helps a little bit better. There we go, zoomed in a little bit more. This is help for the site, so anytime you have a question about how to use a feature or how to make a feature available, you can search up here, and I'll be opening up and using it as an example as I model, just to show you how you can use it while you're modeling. And as always, we have the buy and the save buttons as well, and we'll be using those later on. On the bottom right hand corner, we have intercom, some material editing, which maybe we'll do a little material editing at the end, and then our camera views as well for orbiting and panning and rotating the cameras. You can click like various camera views. So to get started, we're going to delete these parts, but before we do that, I'm just going to describe a little bit how the interface works. As you can see, when I mouse over these parts, they highlight. The entire part is being highlighted when I mouse over them. And when I click on it, I get some available actions. In this case, I'm clicking on what we call a part. And we have a distinction between parts and shapes. Parts are really just 3D images of the objects. This is how we can load large assemblies into the browser very easily, so you can see the parts, you can move them around. And there's a few operations that you can perform on parts, such as translation, rotation, duplicating parts in the scene. This is also how you can add parts to the scene as well from other designs to be used as components. And as you can see, every part, when you select a part, you have this blue button right here, which is the Edit Part button. And when you edit a part, that puts it into shape mode. And as you can see by looking at these two different designs, the shape has edges that are visible and vertices that you can select, and the part doesn't. The part's just the faces, really, of the object. And now when I mouse over the shape, I'm intersecting with different elements of this design. So now I'm mousing over a face, an edge, and now I can select these items as well. And this gives me many more options, many more available options. So that's just something to think about when you're modeling and you're trying to figure out how to get started. You need to make sure that the parts are in edit mode if you're trying to directly change them, other than just really moving them around or copying them in the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and also, a lot of features can be performed with multiple selections. So in this case, delete is one of those features. So I can click on the large arm here, hold control, click on the base, hold control again, click on the connector. And to select the entire shape, this part that is in shape mode, to select the entire thing, I need to double click it. So I'm going to hold control and double click the shape. So anytime I'm selecting a shape, I have to double click. Anytime I select a part or any element such as an edge or face, it's just a single click. So now all of the parts are selected, and I can just hit the delete button. And now we have a fresh slate to start modeling our double pendulum from scratch. I'm going to use a few different features while modeling today, just to give you an example of how they work. There's not one right way to make any design. You can make them a lot of different ways. This is just one way to, like I said, highlight some features and give you let you see a few different options. So to make the base, we're gonna make it with a sketch revolve. So to start a sketch, the easiest way to start a sketch is to just highlight these ordinate planes, and we're gonna start this on the YZ plane. So I'm just gonna hover over the YZ plane, and then click on it, and that's gonna give me an available action, the sketch action. I'm going to click on the sketch, and that drops me right into sketch mode. And one thing you'll notice is that the camera looks a little different. When you start sketching, we automatically switch the camera to orthographic view so that everything's straight on with the camera plane. This makes it a lot easier when sketching. And as you can see, it's straight on with the YZ axis, which is the plane that we clicked on to start sketching. So the first thing we can do is start drawing some lines. I'm just going to go ahead and draw out the profile for what I'm going to, for the base. It's going to look something like this. And when I close that sketch, when I close that loop right there on that last selection at the last point, the profile turned light blue and it stopped drawing lines. The chaining, the line chaining stopped. And that's to indicate and let you know that the sketch contains a closed loop. And you'll see if I add another element to the sketch, like I'm going to add the center line for the axis of revolution, when I start sketching it and when I place the line, I'm going to hit escape right here. That's so that I can stop chaining the line draw, or I could come down and hit the select button. I'm just going to hit the escape button. When you're modeling, it's really convenient to just keep your hand on the left side of the keyboard for access to control and escape. So I'm just going to hit escape. And what happened was we placed another element into the sketch, in this case a single line. It's not part of a closed loop, so the light blue indicator that we had on the one closed loop in our scene went away. And that's to let us know that the sketch does not contain closed loops. And you can't close sketches with closed loops. The other two buttons at the bottom in the sketch tools are to force close a sketch. If you're just trying to, this will delete the sketch and close it. But generally when you are closing a sketch to make something with it, you want to just close the sketch. I'm going to try and close it right now just to show you this is something you'll probably see while you're modeling. And this is the notification that there are open loops in your sketch. And that's indicated by the fact that we don't have that light blue highlight on the closed loop, and everything's the darker blue. And this just lets you know that you need to have a closed loop. So to do that, the elements that are not part of the closed loop either need to be construction geometry or you need to close the loop. So I'm going to click the axis of revolution. And when I select it, I'm in select mode right now. When you're sketching with lines, when you hit the escape button, that stops the polyline sketching. So I'll just demonstrate that one more time. So every time I click, it draws another line. And if I hit escape, that stops drawing the polyline. And I can hit escape again, and that'll put me in select mode. So now that I'm in select mode, I can select sketch entities. Control select applies here as well, just like when clicking on designs. So when I'm going to control select both of these lines and just hit the delete button to get rid of them. And now I'm going to select the axis of revolution, and this gives me some available constraints and dimensioning options. One of the available constraints, or in this case it's just setting the construction of the item, is to toggle the construction. So when I click that, the line turns black. That's to indicate that this is a construction element and it's not going to be counted when we're trying to find closed loops in the sketch. And I also want to make this axis of revolution vertical, so I'm going to click the vertical. And as you can see, these constraints turn green when they're applied to the elements. Right now we don't have constraint visualizations actually on the interface, so there's no vertical constraint indicating that this line is vertical. I'm going to hit escape to deselect it. You'll just have to notice that when you select the item, these are the constraints that are currently applied, vertical and construction. And there currently isn't a length, but we don't need any length for this axis. So I'm just going to make this sketch a little more skewed, just to show you how constraints work. So it's not necessary to perfectly draw out the profile that you're trying to make when you first make it. You just really need to get it in the general size and shape before you start applying constraints. And constraints are what control the orientation and magnitude of the sketch elements. So the first thing I'm going to do with this sketch profile is straighten everything up by adding some vertical and horizontal constraints. And I can click all of the vertical elements by holding Control and just selecting each of them. And I can click all of the horizontal elements by doing the same thing, holding Control, selecting each of them, and then coming down here and clicking on the horizontal constraint. And as always, you can hit Escape to deselect the items. So that just applied vertical constraints to all the vertical items and horizontal constraints to all the horizontal items. So anytime I move an element, the associated sketch elements stay aligned. So now we can go ahead and apply some dimensions. It's always a good idea to apply your biggest dimension first, just to get an idea of scale. So the overall length for this is 27 millimeters. So I'm going to click on the line, go down here to the length, type in 27, and either click the checkbox or hit the enter. And as you can see, everything adjusted, and this is going to give me an idea of scale, and I can go ahead and readjust everything for roughly where it needs to be. I'm going to click on this point and the bottom origin point, and I'm just going to align this with the origin by applying a horizontal constraint. Okay, so now this is roughly it, and let's see, the outer diameter of this base part is, the outer radius of this base part is 15 millimeters. So I'm going to click the origin, control click the outer point, and we're just going to apply a horizontal dimension. We don't need to apply the distance or the vertical, just the horizontal is all that we really need to constrain here, because we already have the horizontal constraint on the bottom line, and that'll be 15 millimeters. So as you can see, I was really zoomed out. I can kind of zoom in here and adjust all that. Okay, so now we can just go ahead and add a few more radii here. The radii of the boss that's going into the center of the bearing is going to be 4.05 millimeters. That's just a line-to-line fit. That seemed to print really well, so that it's just a slight press fit on the model. And then the ID radius is going to be 2.5 millimeters. This is so we can put a screw through the base and attach it to something. And then this boss radius will be 6 millimeters. And now we can add a few more constraints. The line length for this, the boss, the ID boss, and the bearing 7 millimeters. This is going to be 4 millimeters. And that should be everything. As you can see, I can't really drag or move anything. That is fully constrained. So now we can close the sketch. We have a light blue closed loop profile and an axis of revolution. So I'm going to go ahead and close the sketch. That puts us back into perspective mode. Now when working with sketches, there can be multiple profiles in a sketch. So when you select a single profile, that shows you some available actions. In this case, extrude. If you need to select the entire sketch to edit it or to move it, you can double click a profile, and that allows you to have access to editing the sketch, translating, rotating the sketch, and that's just because you can have multiple profiles in the same sketch. So just as an example, I'm going to go ahead and show extrude. That's the only available action that is shown when you select a profile by itself. You can click the extrude, you can pull the element out and do a check mark, and that's a nice prismatic extrude of that profile. But in this case, we want to make a revolve. So I'm going to undo. You can do that with Control Z. Come down to the left-hand corner right here. This is the List Sketches button, and here's a single sketch, the only sketch we've made so far, and I can click that, and that's going to make it visible. So now, since I want to make a revolve, I need a profile and an axis to revolve about. So when I select the profile and I select the axis, I get the revolve feature. So I can click on revolve. This is going to be a 360 revolve, and do that. And now we've made our base part. And just to highlight the help videos again, when you're trying to, maybe you don't know what elements are needed to make a feature available, you can always search in the help. In this case, here's revolve, and that shows you the Orchard Revolve tool, and you can watch this video while you're modeling. It'll tell you what you need to select and how to make that feature available. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and make the arms. One more thing to note is we have measure tools, so depending on what you've selected, you're going to get different measurements. In this case, I clicked on a line and I got the 16 millimeter measurement right here. That's the length of the line. I'm just going to zoom out just a little bit so I can select this base XY plane, and we're just going to sketch on the XY plane to start. So the first thing I need is a through hole through the arm. And then I'm going to make a counterbore hole, and then lastly the outer arc. I'm going to hit escape to get out of draw circle mode. I'm going to click on the arc. Now I'm going to draw the outer arc, and then the arm pieces. I'm hitting escape to stop the line chaining. I'm going to escape again and then click on draw arc. And today I'm actually just going to make these through hole and counterbore pieces, only draw them once, just to show you translating a part and keeping cut tools for patterning cut features. So we're just going to draw these two circles and not one at the base. So if you zoom in a little bit, you can select the center of the arc, and the first thing I'm going to do is attach that, snap that to the origin. When the origin turns green, when you're dragging the center around, that's when you know it can snap. So now our origin, everything's centered on the origin. So the first constraint I'm going to apply is a vertical constraint. You do this by clicking the center of the bottom arc and the origin and applying the control, collecting the center of the arc and the origin and clicking the vertical constraint. We need to add a vertical constraint to both of these arm pieces. So I'm control clicking them. We need to add an equal constraint to the arcs. So I control select the arcs, add the equal constraint, so now they're the same size. And we're going to go ahead and put a horizontal constraint right here. I can drag this to kind of show you, to keep these arm pieces centered. So we add that. Okay. Now we need to add some dimensions to these parts. The ID through hole is going to be an 8 millimeter radius. The counterbore hole is going to be 11 millimeter radius, and the OD of the arc is going to be 17 millimeter radius. I can't remember if I add, yeah, I'd already put that equal. And the thickness across the arms is going to be a horizontal distance of 16 millimeters between the 2 points on the arm. Okay, so that constrained everything but the length of the arm, and this is something, just keep this in mind, because we're going to open this sketch again to make the short arm. There's no use redoing all this work. So I control selected the center of the bottom arc and the top arc, and in this case we're going to make this arm a little larger just to increase the period of motion. So the vertical distance will be 140 millimeters. Okay, so that's the last dimension that we needed on this sketch, and we can close it. I'm going to go ahead and translate this sketch up. I can do that by double clicking the sketch. I'm going to go ahead and put it up approximately where it needs to go. This was 18 millimeters, I believe. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is just go ahead and make these through hole pieces. I can do that by clicking the sketch element and dragging it out. Right now, when you turn a sketch element into a solid, the sketch is hidden. Let us know what you think about that. If you have any opinions on whether or not you think that we should hide the sketch after every feature or make it manually hidden, that would be some good feedback for us. We're going to extrude this 9 millimeters. I'm going to go ahead and pull these down, actually, just so they're easier to select. So what I'm doing right here, this is a select through features, and you can do this by holding the center button and scrolling the center mouse button. So it's a select scroll on the center mouse button, and I'm just pulling this out so it's easier to select when I do the cut in a minute. The sketch list is still open, so I can just click that and open the sketch back up, and now we're going to extrude this 13 millimeters. Okay, so these are the 3 pieces we need to make our pendulum arm. I'm going to double click the shape, and then hold Control and double click the cut pieces that we're going to use. So the first item you select is your shape, and any items that you select after that are the tools that you're going to use to cut the object with. So when I multi-select these shapes, I get a few different available options. I could fuse all three of them together. I could cut any subsequent pieces from the first piece, or I could find the common area that they all share, or they could all be scaled or deleted. We're going to cut them. I'm going to turn Keep Tools on because I'm going to use these two tools again down here at the base. And like I said before, you could have just put 2 more circles in the sketch and extruded them again, so either way is perfectly fine. That was a successful cut, so now we're going to click on our objects and we're going to translate them. I did that by double selecting the object, double clicking the object, clicking the translate feature, and translating it 140 millimeters in the Y direction, because I know that's the length, the center to center length of my arm. I'm going to do the same operation again, first selecting the arm and then selecting my tools. And now I don't need these tools anymore, so I can turn that off. And now we have our arm piece with the counter bore. And while we're doing this, we're just going to go ahead and make the other arm. So I can double select that sketch, hit the edit button, and we're going to go back to that center constraint that we applied. I selected the center of the bottom arc and the center of the top arc. And we have that vertical distance. We need at least 40 millimeters clearance so that the arms don't hit the base when they're swinging around. So we'll make this next arm, the smaller arm, 100 millimeters. And as you can see, this one constraint didn't adjust correctly because it's still a valid constraint. The arc distance the same, it's just on the top side as opposed to the bottom side. So what we can do is just kind of grab it and pull it, and it'll snap to its other possible solution. Oops, let me pull that back up. So now that sketch is done, we can close the sketch, and we're just going to make the same extrudes again. And we can do that by, again, you can through select by holding down the scroll button and scrolling. Let's go ahead and pull that through. Go back down here, turn our sketch back on, or show the visibility of the sketch. In this case, I'm going to pull this one all the way through up and do it and translate it, and you'll see why in a second. I'm just going to make the arm with counterbore up instead of down. And the arm thickness again is 13 millimeters. So my counterbore, I want the counterbores facing up, so I'm going to go ahead and translate this up 2 millimeters. And you'll see that in just a second. So I can double click my arm, Control double click my cut pieces. We'll keep the cut pieces again and perform the operation. And now we'll translate the pieces again. In this case, it's going to be, it's going to be 100 millimeters in the Y direction. Double click the arm, and then double click the cut tools. And we don't need to keep them. Okay, so now there's our second arm, and now we can go ahead and position this. Since we want the centers to line up, that'll be 140 millimeters in the Y direction. And it's going to be negative 13 millimeters in the Z direction, I believe. Nope, that's not quite right. I think this one needs to be up 3 millimeters. It doesn't really matter, these are just static assemblies anyways for visualization. So there we go, I think that's right. Okay, so there's our two arms. As you can see, the counterbore on the bottom one's facing up, the counterbore on the top one's facing down. This will allow us to kind of just squeeze that joint when we're pressing them together, and also the counterbore's facing down at the base right here, so you can push that joint on. And we have another joint here. If you wanted to make this a triple pendulum and go crazy, you could do that. You can make another arm 40 millimeters shorter than this one. Or maybe you could press something else into that arm. I know we've seen some cool stuff on YouTube with some IR lights and lasers and drawing stuff. So the next piece that we're going to make is the connector piece for the bearings. And we're just going to be lazy here. Instead of drawing something else, we're just going to take what we already have, which is a nice press fit part for the ID of the bearing. And I'm just going to duplicate this part at 140 millimeters. So it's sitting right here, but we really need this feature facing in both directions. So to do that, I'm going to click on the bottom. Actually, we're going to go ahead and put a, to do that, I'm going to just put a cut piece into the scene. So here's a little tool that we can use to do some cutting. And I'll just slide it over there. So now we can double click our shape, double click our tool, and cut the tool from the shape. So if you see here, now we have a little flange on the tool, and we have a little boss. So we want to mirror this feature, and since mirror is a new feature and maybe you haven't used it before, you can come up here to the help, type in mirror, and here's a video on mirroring objects in Orchard. It'll tell you how to use that tool. And you can use the mirror tool by double clicking the shape and then holding control and clicking a face that you would like to mirror it about. In this case, it's just going to be the bottom face of that shape. And that mirrors the tool. And now we want to fuse them because they are two separate parts. So I'm going to control double click both parts and hit the fuse button. And there we go. The two parts are fused. Now we have our connector. Let's just go ahead and finish up these arms real quick. We can style them just a little bit. I'm going to control select the this ID corner on both arms. When you're adding fillets and chamfers, it's always a good idea to wait till the very end when you're done modeling. It's very difficult to modify these features currently, so keeping your features pretty prismatic is going to help you go a long way with the designs that you're making, and only adding the finishing fillets and chamfers at the end. So we're going to go ahead and add a 1 centimeter radius fillet, and as you can see, that put a little fillet in that joint. And now we can control select just one top edge and one bottom edge on both arms, and let's go ahead and add a 2 millimeter chamfer. And that chamfered all of the parts. And that is it. That's all we have for today. That is the double pendulum. Those are all the parts you need to make it. We're going to go ahead and save this as a double pendulum. We've modified the save menu just a little bit. There's two tabs here now, the scene and the parts, and you can label each one of your parts. And on the scene, you can describe what you're saving. And if you'd like to tag it for searching purposes later, you can add some tags. Okay, so as you can see right here, it's saving each of the parts. And then you get the everything saved successfully. Make sure you don't navigate away until you get the everything saved successfully. Also, I forgot to mention for materials, I told you I'd show you that. You can double click an object, click the material, hit edit, and now you can adjust the materials. And those are all saved to the parts when you save the design. So I think that's everything for today. Were all the questions answered? Okay, that's good to go. We're signing off. Have a happy Pi Day, everybody.